Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a game that you can purchase right now from the company's website. That game is called Dragon Lords: The Battle of Darion, and it's from Wolf Lord Games. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the company's official website in order to see all the different products they offer related to the game. You can buy the game itself, you can buy special sets of the game with multiple sets, you can buy special miniatures for the game mats, extra dice, things like that, some of which I will actually feature in the preview section here, so you can kind of take a look and see what they're like in action, so to speak. And then, hopefully you will consider purchasing directly from the site if you like what you see here. And so I'm going to try to show you what the game is like just to give you an idea first. But just to give you a brief synopsis before we get to that part, this is a competitive head-to-head card game, primarily for 2 players. But of course, you can play with 3 players, 4 players, playing against each other like individually. You can play as a team, 1 versus all type game. There is even a special solo mode as well, where you are playing against, you by yourself are playing against the game itself, but we're going to focus on the 2-player game for now. And what this is that you are fielding an army against your opponent's army using fantasy warriors and knights and dragons. The knights can actually ride the dragons into battle or fight separately. You have different warriors, shamans, wizards, sorcerers. You have special summoned units that can come onto the field during the course of the game, upgrades and equipment for all of those different units, spell cards, special order cards, because you are the general of this army essentially, and so on and so forth. And it's a dice-based game as well, so you build your army ahead of time, put the army out there, and then go into dice-based combat. There's actually a spatial element as well, where you're actually moving your units around on the battlefield in a manner of speaking, and you're trying to either completely wipe out your opponent or get enough points to win. But without further ado, let's get to that preview section so I can show you how the game plays with just a very brief synopsis of it, and then in any event, we will come back and discuss it further. Dragon Lords: The Battle of Darion is a competitive card game primarily for 2 players, but it can be played with up to 4 players and even solo. You can even do a special 1 versus all mode. Each player controls an army of good, evil, or neutral units composed of dragons, knights, warriors, and beasts. You'll field your army directly against your opponent's army using a deck you'll assemble ahead of time. The goal is to either wipe out your opponent's army altogether or be the first to attain 50 victory points. Let's focus on the 2-player game for this preview. The most important thing both players must do before the game begins is build their army. This actually consists of 3 sets of cards. Your army cards are the troops and tools you'll use directly in battle. They can be dragons, knights, general units, and upgrade cards, which are special equipment cards that go onto your unit cards. Each army card has a point cost in the upper left corner opposite its mana score that also doubles as their health total, and your army can total no more than 55 of these points. It also must have at least 1 dragon and 1 knight, and you must choose an alignment either good or evil. You may only choose army cards of the chosen alignment plus neutral cards. All unit cards also have several other common stats, including class, alignment, innate abilities that always occur when applicable and are not optional, and selective abilities that you must activate, often by spending mana. The bottom of the unit cards will list the number of dice you get to roll for melee and ranged combat, and also its defense rating. Another set of cards is the order deck. You must have 20 order cards that total no more than 20 points. These are special effect cards that you can use in conjunction with your units, but bear in mind that many of them have restrictions based on class, alignment, and mana, so you must keep your army composition in mind when building this deck. The third set of cards is the spell deck, which is 10 cards totaling 10 points. These have even more dramatic effects than order cards, but similar restrictions. Also, every mage class unit in your army gives you 2 more starting spell cards and 2 more points with which to spend on them. Now for the physical play area setup. Start by laying out the game mats, 1 for each player and a larger mat between them. If you don't have the mats, that's fine, but it's important that you delineate the 3 zones: your kingdom, your opponent's kingdom, and the battleground between them. Each player will lay out the army cards assembled beforehand and take a flight and mount token for each flying and mounted unit they have, respectively, and place those tokens near those units. Then they will shuffle their order and spell decks, place them face down on their mat, and draw 3 from each to constitute their starting hand that is hidden from their opponent. Each player gets a set of dice, regular 6-sided dice, special blue magic dice, and special red battle dice. They also each get 2 gem tokens and 3 healing potion tokens. Make a supply of the many other tokens that can be used in the game, including damage and status effect tokens. There are 2 other types of cards that both players must worry about. While setting up, each player will choose 2 location cards, randomly select one, and then leave it in their play area. These have innate abilities that will affect the cards on your field and also have an alignment like army cards. You will also shuffle and place down the summoning deck, so that both players can reach it. These unit cards function just like your army unit cards, except that they will only be summoned to your field via special card effects or unit abilities. Some units will summon specific units from this deck, and the new unit will be bound to that summoning card. The last thing you do for setup is roll for initiative, and whoever wins gets the initiative token to indicate that they'll start first. Then you can begin the game. The game takes place in rounds. Players will go back and forth activating one unit in their army at a time, starting with the person who won initiative. When you choose a unit to activate, it gets 2 orders, each of which can be used to perform various actions. When a unit finishes its activation and orders, slide it sideways to indicate that it has been expended. The first type of order you can give is, well, orders, with a capital O. You can activate an ability on an order card in your hand, or a spell card, or any selective ability that has the special order symbol next to it on the chosen unit in your army. Note that some order abilities have additional costs like mana, in which case you'll need to keep track of the unit's expended mana with tokens. Some powerful order abilities actually require using both orders for that unit for the round. Another type of order action is moving a unit from one zone to an adjacent zone, including into an enemy's kingdom if you need to. This is necessary if you want to perform a melee attack against a unit in another zone, or alleviate the penalty for using a ranged attack from too far away. Perhaps the most critical order action is performing an attack with the unit, or using a spell or order ability that initiates that attack. But regardless, unless an ability says otherwise, each unit may only attack once per turn, no matter how they initiate it. But we'll get back to this in a moment. There are several other order actions that a unit can take. They could use a healing potion on themselves or a unit in the same zone, making them regain hit points equal to their healing value. Knights can mount or dismount a dragon for an order, and flying units can land or take off for an order. Knights riding dragons gain a bonus to their armor while mounted, but must move with the dragon as one unit unless they dismount. But both the dragon and knight can spend orders separately to move both of them together. If the dragon is defeated, the knight falls and takes 2 damage. The dragon itself, and any other flying unit, gains an armor bonus versus ranged attacks while flying, and can't be melee attacked at all unless it's from another airborne unit. In fact, they also gain a bonus versus ground units when they get attacked. However, a unit may only stay airborne for 2 full rounds, and then must spend an order to land and can't take off again for another full round. There are a few free actions that you can perform by using gems that will not cost you orders. A unit can spend 3 gems to draw a spell or order card from their decks, or can spend 3 gems to take a healing potion token for later use. Back to attacking. Melee attacks must be performed against a unit in the same zone. Ranged attacks can be performed in the same zone, from 1 zone away at a -1 to damage result penalty, and from 2 zones away at a -2 to damage result penalty, and a cost of 1 additional gem. When you determine what kind of attack you're doing, look at the bottom of the unit card and the numbers that are there, which indicate how many regular dice to roll for either melee or ranged attacks. It will also indicate if you roll a red attack die or a blue magic die. Roll all of these dice together with any bonus dice you may get from abilities, upgrades, or the location effect. If the target has an armor rating number under their picture, the dice you roll must be that number or higher in order to be considered successful hits. However, the defending target also gets to roll a number of defense dice, equal to the number of successful hits, plus any bonuses. and in order to block those hits, each defense die must meet or beat the number in the bottom right corner of the defending unit's card. The attacking unit also resolves their battle or magic die. Depending on the symbol that comes up, it can deal extra damage, steal a gem, botch it and damage themselves, or even gain another order for the turn. Any hits that are not blocked become damage, and the defending unit takes a damage token for each point. There's also the possibility that the attack will deal status effects like poison, burning, or dazed. If the damage ends up meeting or exceeding the unit's cost/health, the unit is defeated along with any of its upgrade cards that are attached to it. The attacker then gains victory points equal to the cost of both the unit and its upgrades, if any. When every unit has been activated or passed, resolve any end-of-round effects on any card on the field, starting with whoever has initiative, followed by any other kind of location or spell effects that need to be resolved. All unit cards are put into the ready position again, all mana expenditure tokens are removed, and both players draw 3 order cards and 2 spell cards from their decks, respectively. Finally, the initiative token passes to the other player, and a new round begins. The game will continue on like this until one player either reaches 50 victory points or more, or if that player eliminates every one of their opponent's units. In either of these cases, that player is the immediate winner of the game. That is Dragon Lords: The Battle of Darion. Well, I think it goes without saying, you don't need to hear me say it, that 2-player competitive, even fantasy-based card games are not necessarily a new or unique thing, but it is interesting and unique how Dragon Lords: The Battle of Darion chooses to do this type of game, because it's not just build a deck, throw some cards out, fight, attack versus defense, and that's that, turn after turn after turn. No, there's just so many other things going on in this game. It's more comparable to say that this is a 2-player head-to-head card game for board game players, for people who, or for just strategy game players in general, who want a meatier game that's not just the cards. You're not just doing that. You have to build your deck ahead of time, but really you're actually building several decks. First of all, you have to build your army, your unit cards that you're just laying out at the start of the game, and you have to see how those work in tandem together. You need at least a knight and a dragon. You want a knight and a dragon, so you have to see how those 2 cards work in tandem together. Decide if you're going to do evil and neutral units, or good and neutral units, or just good or just evil. Then you have to build your spell deck and your order deck, and those are completely separate things, but they have to work in unison with the units that you chose as well. If you are using units that summon other cards, you have to take that into account too, and the location cards. So there's all these different moving parts. They all have to work together well in order if you want to succeed, and so it's just a meatier game. Which is not to say, I don't want to give the impression that it's like an overwhelming game. Certainly, if you have experience with other competitive fantasy-based card games, that you would feel right at home here, and you might be like, oh, this is interesting, I'm rolling dice, and there's all these different things to keep track of. But even though you have the dice-based combat element and the spatial element, which is very interesting of moving between the different zones, even with those, it's all very streamlined, and you always have the feeling of like, it makes sense. Like, okay, here's the ability that I use, here's how I use it, keep track of it with tokens, boom. There's a ton of tokens in the game, but again, all of it makes very sense. Oh, I set you on fire, here's a burning token. I have a healing potion, here's a healing token. Especially if you're coming from a background of knowing about role-playing games, fantasy role-playing tabletop games, and things like that, those little elements will make sense too. So they kind of took those elements from meatier, strategic tabletop games, put them together with the streamlined card game thing, streamlined all the elements together, and put it into this competitive army-based game. So it's not necessarily a game that you're just going to knock out on your lunch break, but it is going to be a more involved and potentially, if it's your thing, fulfilling game for you, because it's also not a game that's just going to be over and before the game even starts. You have to long-term plan strategies, figure out how you're going to move your units as time goes on, when you're going to take your, the whole flying and mounted thing is a whole other interesting thing that no other traditional card-based fantasy game can really get like, yeah, there can be flying units in other games, but having this mount, and then you have to decide if you want to split up necessarily to get them moving in different directions. There's actual unit-based spatial strategy in the game, like moving an actual army. So if any of that appeals to you, if you're coming from a background of liking fantasy card games, if you like heavy strategic board games as well, but you want something a little bit less, it's not going to take all night like some other much bigger war type games. If you also want something that's customizable, I didn't really talk about that. I mean, this obviously is a customizable card game. There will be further expansions. You can add more cards to it, customize your army to your fit. One game you might be neutral good, one time you might be neutral evil, and so on, and you can switch back and forth. And all the different game modes as well. If any of that interests you, please go to the official website and consider purchasing the game for yourself, along with all the extra accoutrements, miniatures, dice sets, game mats, things like that. That is Dragon Lords: The Battle of Darion from Wolf Lore Games. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, for supporting our sponsors. Take care.